Hi, friends. So this week, I'm sad to report in the Anderson home, the tooth fairy died. I can probably chalk it up to an epic parent fail, one of many. As my kids know, I and we are less than perfect. Well, you're too old. I will say that it was painful for everybody. I'm going to tell you the story, and there's a reason for it. When Mac, my eldest son, when he was little and losing teeth, we would go to extremes, and I mean extremes, to make sure that the tooth fairy was there. And we had all sorts of traps that we'd set up, and that wily tooth fairy would always manage to get the tooth in there no matter what. When Mo was coming up, we did the same thing. And I guess with Lulu, who's our young one, she's 9, she's just started 4th grade this week, third kid syndrome. Like, you just don't do it as well with a third kid, you just don't. And the other thing I can maybe say is that we've been very tired. It's been a rough couple weeks. So this is the story, and there's a reason I'm going to tell you the story, but this is the story. So Lulu lost a tooth, and she doesn't have too many left. Like, really, we're at the end of the baby teeth at this point. But she lost a tooth, let's say it was Monday, and she told us she lost a tooth, and she put the tooth in the little container that she's supposed to for the tooth fairy, and she told us where she was putting it, and she went through all the rituals, and tooth fairy didn't come. Tooth fairy was really tired. By 10 o'clock, I think tooth fairy was out. And usually the tooth fairy gets up about 6:15 in the morning, but something happened. Anyway, tooth fairy didn't come. So she comes in to our room, like livid. The tooth fairy didn't come. And so, of course, we blame it on her, because that's what you do. You say, well, where did you put it? She put it here. Did you leave a note? I didn't leave a note. Oh, you got to leave a note. So yeah, we totally put the blame on her, and so that night, my wife Marita and I looked at each other and said, "Okay, tooth fairy has to come tonight. Has to come." And we had bought these little chocolates from Russia at the farmers market on what's it called? Buford Highway. Yeah, the Buford Highway Farmers Market, which were very distinct, and it doesn't have much to do with the story other than we got busted because the tooth fairy put these chocolates in the pillow but couldn't find the tooth, all right? And then the next morning, Lulu comes down really concerned because, she's excited she got these chocolates, but she still has her tooth, and she doesn't know what to make of that. And this is sort of the end of the story, at least this part of it, she goes into my wife's office, and my wife, after she had put the chocolates under the pillow, had eaten some of the same chocolates and left the wrappers there. So Lulu is young, but she's not dumb. She's really a very smart kid. She put 2 and 2 together, and she got really upset. And she said, "I know you guys are the tooth fairy. Dad, you're the tooth fairy." And of course, you don't lie to them. You can't lie, but you can sort of deflect, right? So she says, "Dad, I know you're the tooth fairy." I said, "Lulu, what are you talking about? I'm not this big." "Dad, you're the tooth fairy." "Lulu, how can I be the tooth fairy? I don't have wings," right? And then she finally looked at me, and it was the moment of truth. And she says, "Dad, tell me the truth. Are you the tooth fairy?" And I went through this with Mac, and I went through this with Mo, so I know when the jig's up. I said to her, "You really want the truth?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, I'm the tooth fairy. I'm the tooth fairy. And we do it because we want to play a game, and we want to make sure that you have a good time, and all of that good stuff." Does she really not know? Oh my God, I ruined her. Oh my God, I'm the worst. Molly, I'm the worst. I'm the worst. Oh my God. All right, and to all you viewers out there, you're welcome. So here's what she was crying about, right? In part, she was crying because well, the world is a lot more special with the tooth fairy in it than without, right? Now, I think that she knew, and I think she had just sort of like reasonable doubt. She liked to get the loot, and she liked to play the game, and I think some part of her sort of held on to this idea that maybe, just maybe, the Tooth Fairy is there. And you know what, Molly? Maybe the Tooth Fairy is there, right? Just not in the Anderson home, okay? Okay, so where are we going with this, and why am I bringing this up on Shabbat? So when people start delving deeply into their Judaism, usually as adults, but sometimes as sort of older children, one of the things that they grapple with is the literal interpretation of the Torah, right? Did Adam and Eve exist? Did they eat the apple, right? Did the snake talk to them, right? Did Moses lead us out of Egypt? Did the sea actually split? And there's many of us who come to the conclusion as adults or as older children that it can't be, or it probably isn't, right? Certainly nothing else in our experience would lend to the fact that happened. Now, we call it a miracle, right? So there's sort of some plausible deniability, so maybe it happened, but for the most part, most of us come to the conclusions that it didn't happen at least exactly the way that it happened there. Maybe it's a metaphor, right? Now, there are some folks that when they reach that conclusion, if they reach that conclusion, they throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. And they say, well, if that isn't true, then the whole thing can't be true, and why bother? That's the Tooth Fairy dying in the Anderson home on Tuesday morning. Okay? And what I like to point out to people when they come back, meaning when they start inquiring again, is whether or not this stuff actually happened is sort of up for debate, right? I can't say definitively did it or didn't it, right? But what I can, and the religion does say, is that whether or not Moses split the actual sea, whether or not that's a fact, it is a fact that we've been telling the story of Moses splitting the sea and leading us out to freedom for 4,000 years. That's a fact. That parent to child, generation to generation, we've been telling the story not to fool ourselves, but because there are profound lessons to pass on every generation, every individual. The idea of coming from Mitzrayim, a narrow place of captivity, and going through trials and tribulations into a place of freedom, that we're not locked down to the realities of yesterday, that the world doesn't have to be an oppressive place, that we in our lives don't have to be shackled to relationships, to political situations, to drugs, to addiction. There's so many ways to take this story, and we have, even if we don't take it literally. And I guess that's why we are here and studying and learning and praying, right? That there is probably a part of us that would like to believe, or maybe does believe, that it's possible that things happen exactly as they say they happen in the Torah, and that's okay. I mean, really, I sort of believe it also, sometimes, some days, depending on the time of day. But there is a much stronger part of me that knows whether or not it is factually true, these things, that our people have devoted our civilization, the Jewish civilization, is devoted to raising up these stories and these symbols and these life cycle events and these prayers to try to bring out the most aspirational sense of self that we can have as individuals. My best self, your best self, our best selves, through these stories, through these life cycle events, and through these rituals. That's not nothing. It's everything. The stories are how we convey the information. And if we struggle with the literal nature of some of the stories, that just means we're engaged. So for those who have gone through those struggles, my hope is that you begin to reach the conclusion that minimally They are divine metaphors, but perhaps they are much, much more. They are ways for our people to convey important, vital information, not just how to engage the world, dayenu, but how to live the most beautiful, meaningful lives that we can through our mundane, everyday movements and interactions.